Some crimes don't begin with screams. They begin with silence, with an ordinary morning that feels no different from 1,000 others. And that's what makes them terrifying. Before we continue, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You're part of this community, and we'd love to hear from you. This story begins on April 17, 2016, in a quiet market town in northern England, the kind of place where people still greet each other by name, where nothing ever seems to change, until it does. That morning, Elaine Parker, a 46-year-old woman known for her gentle nature, woke up in the small terraced house she shared with her mother and younger brother. Elaine had lived a simple life. She wasn't ambitious. She wasn't reckless. She didn't chase excitement. What she valued most was routine. She liked tea in the morning, short walks into town, familiar faces, predictability, and that morning followed the pattern perfectly. Her brother would later tell police that Elaine seemed calm, almost cheerful. They sat together in the kitchen, mugs in hand, talking about nothing important. Before leaving, Elaine mentioned she wanted to stop by the town center to buy a small piece of jewelry, a ring she'd seen weeks earlier. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, just another errand. Before walking out the door, Elaine smiled and said she'd be back later. That would be the last time anyone in her family would ever see her alive. Elaine arrived in town shortly after midday. CCTV cameras would later capture her walking through the shopping district, stopping briefly at a jewelry shop before heading toward the older side of town, where pubs and small bars lined the narrow streets. What happened next puzzled investigators. Elaine wasn't known to drink. When she did, it was rare, and only one or two. But that afternoon, Elaine entered multiple pubs. Witnesses recalled that she seemed unsteady, distracted, almost fragile. At one bar, she was refused service because staff felt she'd already had too much. This was completely out of character. Some would later speculate that something had already gone wrong by then, that Elaine may have been trying to steady herself emotionally or escape something she couldn't yet put into words. As evening fell, Elaine wandered into a pub called the Fox and Anchor, a local drinking spot known for its regulars. And that's where she met Martin Hale. Martin was 51 years old. To the people who drank with him, he was harmless, funny, sarcastic, a man who told crude jokes and laughed too loudly. He was a familiar face at the Fox and Anchor, so familiar that no one questioned him. Witnesses later described Elaine as nervous when she entered the pub. She stood alone at first, scanning the room, her posture tight. Martin noticed her immediately. He struck up a conversation. At first, Elaine appeared hesitant, but over time, something shifted. She relaxed. She smiled. She laughed. To the people watching, it looked like harmless flirting. No one intervened. No one felt alarmed. At one point, Martin offered to buy Elaine a drink. She declined, insisting she wasn't that kind of woman. But the conversation continued, and as the night wore on, the distance between them disappeared. At 11:20 p.m., security cameras captured Elaine and Martin leaving the pub together. They walked side by side down a dimly lit street toward Martin's flat, a short distance away. Elaine hesitated briefly at the corner. Then she followed him. 3 hours later, residents living below Martin's apartment were jolted awake by a loud thud, a heavy impact, someone falling. They assumed Martin had come home drunk again. No one called the police. No one checked. And by morning, Elaine Parker was gone. Elaine didn't come home that night. By midday the next day, her family was frantic. Elaine always called. She always checked in. She never disappeared. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Friends hadn't seen her. Her sister confirmed she hadn't stayed over. That afternoon, her family contacted the police. Meanwhile, Martin Hale went to work. Co-workers noticed something strange. Deep scratches ran down his face and neck. When questioned, Martin claimed he'd injured himself carrying metal poles from a hardware store. The explanation sounded odd, but no one pushed further. A neighbor later told police she saw Martin that morning struggling with a heavy bag. His face looked pale, exhausted, hollow, as if something inside him had collapsed. At the time, none of it made sense. Soon, it would make perfect sense. By the third day after Elaine Parker vanished, the concern had turned into something heavier: fear. Police officers retraced Elaine's last known movements through the town center, working backward from CCTV footage, witness statements, and receipts. Every road led to the same place. Locals told officers about the quiet woman who'd been drinking alone, about how unusual it seemed. And again, one name surfaced. Multiple witnesses confirmed the same thing. Elaine had left the pub with him. At 9:15 a.m. on April 20th, two officers, Detective Sergeant Owen Blake and Constable Ryan Mercer, knocked on the door of Martin's second-floor flat. There was no answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. Just as they were about to leave, the door creaked open. Martin stood there, eyes sunken, hair unkempt, his expression unreadable. The smell hit them instantly. It wasn't strong at first, just a faint, sickening odor that seemed out of place. Like spoiled meat mixed with something chemical, something stale. Martin seemed nervous, shifting his weight as the officers introduced themselves. He confirmed that he had met Elaine at the pub. Yes, they had spoken. Yes, they had walked together for a short time. But then his story changed. He claimed that after making an inappropriate comment, Elaine had become offended and walked away on her own. He said he went home alone and never saw her again. His tone was calm, too calm. The officers weren't convinced, but they didn't yet have enough to detain him. They asked if they could step inside. After a brief hesitation, Martin agreed. The moment the door closed behind them, the smell intensified. It was overwhelming now. Detective Blake would later describe it as unnatural, a smell that didn't belong in a lived-in home. The flat was cluttered, dishes stacked high, curtains drawn tight, no windows open, no fresh air. As they moved deeper into the apartment, Martin's demeanor shifted. His breathing became shallow, his answers shorter. Blake asked to see the bathroom. Martin hesitated, then nodded. The bathroom door was partially closed. Constable Mercer reached out and pulled back the shower curtain. What they saw froze them in place. Inside the bathtub were human limbs, arms, legs, severed cleanly. Time seemed to stop. For a split second, Mercer questioned whether his eyes were deceiving him, whether stress had finally broken his mind. But there was no denying it. This was real, and Elaine Parker was no longer just missing. Martin Hale was immediately taken into custody. Within minutes, the flat was sealed off as a major crime scene. Forensic teams flooded the building as news spread through the neighborhood. Residents were escorted outside as police tape wrapped around the entrance. Inside the flat, investigators made one horrifying discovery after another. A kitchen knife stained and dulled, a handsaw hidden beneath the sink, scissors, carefully washed but still carrying traces of blood. In a sports backpack, officers found Elaine's upper torso, folded unnaturally. Nearby, inside a handbag, were partial remains of fingers and a thumb, later confirmed to match one of the arms found in the bathtub. But one thing was missing: Elaine's head. As investigators searched, the weight of the crime settled over them. This wasn't panic. This wasn't an accident. This was methodical. During questioning, Martin finally spoke. He admitted that Elaine had been inside his flat. He admitted that she had died there, but he insisted it was not murder. According to Martin, Elaine had become aggressive, accusing him of theft. He claimed she attacked him, and in a moment of fear and rage, he strangled her. He said he lost control. Then came the part that made the room fall silent. Martin admitted he had disposed of some of Elaine's remains. Not in the flat, not in bins, but in a storm drainage tunnel beneath the town. He described the location calmly, almost clinically. Police immediately organized a search. They had no idea what they were about to find. The storm drain was dark, damp, and narrow. Officers entered with flashlights, the sound of dripping water echoing through the tunnel. Halfway down, one officer spotted a red duffel bag resting on a ledge above shallow water. As the beam of light shifted, something else came into view. A human head lying on its side, bruised, discolored, marked with clear signs of trauma. Elaine's face. Inside the red bag were more of her remains. The realization hit hard. Martin had carried her head through public streets, past homes, past strangers. No one noticed. No one stopped him. By morning, the town was in shock. Media vans lined the streets. Police stood guard outside the flat. Neighbors spoke in whispers, struggling to process the horror that had been hiding above them. The Fox and Anchor closed its doors. People who had seen Elaine that night replayed every moment in their minds, every smile, every laugh, every chance to intervene. And for the officers involved, the images would never fade. What had started as a missing person case had become something far darker, and the worst revelations were still to come. When the initial shock faded, the investigation entered its most disturbing phase. What exactly had happened inside Martin Hale's flat? And why? The answers wouldn't come from Martin himself. They would come from the evidence. Elaine Parker's remains were transferred to a secure forensic facility under heavy police escort. What pathologists discovered over the following days would leave even seasoned professionals shaken. Elaine had died from manual strangulation. Deep bruising around the neck indicated sustained pressure, not a momentary loss of control. The marks told a story of prolonged force, applied deliberately until breathing stopped completely. The dismemberment had occurred after death, and it was precise. Clean separations at the joints, minimal hesitation marks, a methodical approach that suggested familiarity with cutting flesh and bone. One pathologist would later testify that whoever carried out the dismemberment had experience, using knives on bodies, human or animal. This wasn't guesswork, it was skill. Investigators dug into Martin Hale's past. Years earlier, Martin had worked in meat processing and butchery. He knew how to break down carcasses efficiently. He understood anatomy. He knew where to cut. In court, prosecutors would say his professional background had been repurposed in the most horrifying way imaginable. But skill alone didn't explain the motive. For that, police turned to Martin's digital footprint. Martin's laptop was seized and examined by cybercrime specialists. What they found raised new, deeply unsettling questions. In the hours after Elaine's death, Martin had spent a prolonged amount of time watching explicit adult content. Not before, not days later, immediately after. The browsing history showed no panic, no searches for help, no signs of shock or remorse, just consumption. Prosecutors would later argue this, strongly suggested that Elaine's body had been used for sexual gratification after death, a claim that would haunt the courtroom. DNA evidence supported the accusation. Traces of Martin's DNA were found on Elaine's body in places that could not be explained by consensual contact or a brief altercation. The narrative of self-defense began to crumble. As the search continued, investigators made another discovery. Some of Elaine's internal organs were missing. At first, police feared they had been disposed of elsewhere. Then plumbing specialists were called to Martin's flat. Inside the pipes, officers found tissue blocking the drainage system. He had tried to flush parts of her away. It was an act so disturbing that even hardened detectives struggled to comprehend it. During further questioning, Martin's account began to shift. He claimed he'd been drunk, that everything felt unreal, that he vomited repeatedly after realizing what he'd done. He said he was disgusted by himself. But the evidence told a different story. The timeline didn't fit panic. The actions weren't impulsive. The cleanup wasn't rushed. Instead, it was calculated. Martin had waited, planned, carried body parts through public areas, returned to normal life, went to work, laughed with co-workers. The prosecution would later say, this was not a man overwhelmed by horror. This was a man indulging in it. As details emerged, the town struggled to cope. Elaine Parker had been a familiar face, a woman people waved to in passing, a daughter, a sister. Vigils were held outside her family home, flowers piled up along the street. Her mother described the loss as living inside a nightmare that never ends. Her brother spoke of sleepless nights, of anger that refused to fade. But grief wasn't the only emotion spreading through the town. There was fear. Fear that something so monstrous had lived among them unnoticed. Fear that the signs had been there all along. By late 2016, the case against Martin Hale was overwhelming. Murder, abuse of a corpse, concealment of remains. The trial would not be easy. Officers who had entered the flat struggled with flashbacks. One would later break down while giving testimony, describing the moment he pulled back the shower curtain. I thought I was watching a horror film, he said. I couldn't accept it was real. But it was real, and soon, a courtroom would hear every detail, every cut, every lie, every calculated step. The courtroom was packed. Cameras were forbidden, but whispers carried the weight of a town gripped by horror. Families, friends, neighbors, and journalists all came to witness the trial of Martin Hale, a man who had once been a familiar, almost harmless face in a small northern England town. For Elaine Parker's family, every detail that would unfold over the next 2 weeks would reopen wounds that could never fully heal. The prosecution painted a picture of calculated evil. Elaine had been lured from a pub into Martin's apartment, assaulted and murdered deliberately. Every piece of forensic evidence supported this. The strangulation marks on her neck indicated deliberate application of force. Dismemberment demonstrated skill and planning, not panic. Digital evidence suggested post-mortem sexual activity. DNA evidence linked Martin directly to Elaine's body. Prosecutors highlighted Martin's professional history in meat processing, showing how he applied his knowledge to her murder. They emphasized the missing organs and tissue found blocking plumbing as part of his methodical attempt to erase evidence. Martin's defense argued temporary loss of control, claiming Elaine had attacked him first. The killing had been self-defense. He had panicked, then tried to dispose of the body out of horror and shame. But inconsistencies in his story were glaring. The timeline suggested premeditation. Body parts had been carried and hidden over several hours. His online activity after her death suggested deliberate, perverse motives rather than remorse. Even his co-workers, who initially described him as quiet and professional, were shocked by the evidence. The courtroom heard from Detective Sergeant Owen Blake, who described walking into the flat and seeing limbs in the bathtub. His voice cracked as he said, "I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I felt like I had stepped into a nightmare." Forensic pathologists who confirmed Elaine's death was deliberate and the dismemberment precise. Neighbors who described hearing a loud thud in the early hours and their initial assumption that Martin had fallen drunk, never imagining the truth. Every testimony painted a picture of cold calculation, rather than an accident or sudden rage. For 2 weeks, the jury sat through hours of evidence, grisly photographs, medical reports, and disturbing digital files. At times, the jurors exchanged glances of disbelief. One whispered that the world seemed darker than they had ever imagined. For Elaine's family, every minute was torture. Her mother sat silently, clutching her hands, while her brother fidgeted with anger that threatened to boil over. On November 21, 2016, the moment of truth arrived. The courtroom fell silent. The foreperson read aloud, "We, the jury, find the defendant, Martin Hale, guilty of murder and the abuse and concealment of a corpse." There was no reaction from Martin, no remorse, no tears. His face remained expressionless, almost eerily calm. The judge, voice heavy with the weight of justice, delivered the sentence: life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. Elaine's family wept quietly. Relief, sorrow, and anger intertwined in one overwhelming wave. The town, still reeling from the revelations, struggled to comprehend the enormity of the crime. One thing was clear: the small town would never feel safe again. In the weeks that followed, residents spoke openly about the warning signs they had missed. Vigils were held in memory of Elaine Parker. Mental health counselors worked with first responders, many of whom reported lasting trauma. Her mother would later say, "It feels like we're living in a nightmare. He tore our family apart. There's no way to heal from this." Her brother admitted, "I am angry every day. I struggle to sleep most nights. Nothing will ever feel normal again." The case left a scar not only on her family but on the entire community. It became a chilling reminder: evil sometimes hides behind familiar faces. Long after the courtroom emptied, long after the headlines faded, the echoes of what happened to Elaine Parker remained. Some crimes end with a verdict. Others never truly end at all. This was one of them. Psychologists who later reviewed the case agreed on one chilling conclusion. Martin Hale didn't snap. There was no sudden break, no single moment of madness. Instead, there was permission. Permission granted by alcohol, by isolation, by opportunity. Experts described Martin as someone who had learned to wear normalcy like armor. A man capable of blending into everyday life while suppressing deeply disturbing impulses. To neighbors, he was forgettable. To co-workers, reliable. To strangers, harmless. That was the danger. Elaine Parker trusted her instincts. She trusted the setting. She trusted the crowd. She trusted the man. And that trust cost her everything. Investigators would later say there was nothing Elaine could have done differently. She didn't act recklessly. She didn't provoke danger. She simply crossed paths with the wrong person, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. The officers who entered Martin's flat were changed forever. One admitted he could no longer shower without remembering what he saw behind the curtain. Another said certain smells triggered instant nausea. They were trained professionals, but no training prepares someone for discovering a human being dismantled like an object. Even years later, some refused interviews. Others sought counseling. The case became a cautionary example within police training, used not for shock but for honesty. Because some scenes don't leave you, they follow you home. Elaine's mother rarely spoke publicly after the trial. When she did, her words were simple. I wake up every morning expecting to hear her in the kitchen. Her brother said anger became his shadow, not just toward Martin, but toward the randomness of it all, toward how easily life could be destroyed by someone hiding in plain sight. Birthdays went uncelebrated, holidays lost their meaning, grief became routine. The Fox and Anchor eventually reopened, but it never felt the same. Regulars sat in different seats. Conversations died early. No one lingered late. Parents warned daughters. Friends checked in more often. Strangers were watched more closely. The town didn't become paranoid. It became aware. Elaine Parker wasn't remembered for how she died. She was remembered for how she lived. Kind, quiet, gentle. A woman who deserved safety. Her story remains a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they laugh beside you. Sometimes they buy the next round. Sometimes they walk you home. And sometimes they never let you leave. If there is one lesson from this case, it's this. Pay attention to silence, trust unease, and never assume evil announces itself. Because the most horrifying crimes begin like any other day.